Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
Councilmember Smith. Here. Mayor Baker. Here. Councilmember Danuski. Here. Deputy Mayor Van Ness.
Here.
Councilmember Sperry. Here. Councilmember Herbig.
Here.
If you will all stand and kindly join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand. The agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda, citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Eric Admin.
Hello, Council. Eric Admin, 7815 Northeast 192nd Street, Kenmore. I want to comment on the potential Squires Landing restoration. So I want to thank you for carefully considering and deliberating on the issue. I know you have multiple priorities that you have to balance, and so my hope was that this is probably maybe the biggest opportunity to ever fully restore that site with a lot of matching funds. So I know that that's not a guarantee that Kenmore can come up with the matching funds to do the project, but I just wanted to make sure that before you close that door that you really went through every option to make sure that that was something that was possible to do. So I don't know for sure how you guys are going to vote one way or the other this evening, but if it's possible to keep the door open and restore that site, that important site on the Sammamish River, then I think that's great. But in any case, I know good things are going to be happening to that park regardless with the waterways and walkways passing. So anyhow, just thank you for your consideration on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Admin.
Ann Anderson.
Hi, my name is Ann Anderson, 16304 81st Place Northeast. Good evening, council members. I was one of the petitioners that won the appeal of the city's ordinance before the Growth Management Hearings Board, Central Puget Sound Region, State of Washington. The final decision in order. Petitioners challenged the city's adoption of an amendment to its public agency utility exception to critical areas regulations. The board, the Growth Management Hearings Board, found that there was no scientific evidence in the record to support the action and concluded that the city failed to demonstrate that it included best available science in developing the amendment in violation of RCW 3670A172. So this ordinance that the city tried to expand the public agency utility exception last year, and it would have allowed the city a blanket exemption from basic environmental protection laws. So that's why we're here tonight. We are happy that the Growth Management Hearings Board struck down the ordinance because we believe it was a bad law designed to get around basic compliance with environmental protection responsibilities. To follow up on this issue, several of us appeared before the council on December 12th of last month, and we requested that the city get an independent second opinion of the critical area boundaries around the ball field and the stream 0226 at St. Edward State Park. On December 12, 2016, Ann Hurst gave you 2 maps from the city's critical area study of the site, which contradicted each other. One was done in 2008 and one was done in 2016. So I know you've all seen the maps. You're all given copies of the 2 contradictory maps done by okay. A second opinion should clear up these contradictions. In addition to our request, the State Department of Ecology has also suggested that the city get an independent second opinion of this site's critical areas. In the email between city staff and Paul Anderson of Department of Ecology on Wednesday, July 27, 2016, the city replied that you were also considering obtaining such a second opinion. We have not received a response from the city regarding this request for a second opinion, so I am here again requesting an independent second opinion of the critical areas boundaries at the St. Edward Ball Field. And please respond in writing, because the two maps provided by your wetlands consultant, Adolphson, contradict each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
There's nobody else signed up,
Anybody
but
else
others
wishing
had
to be heard?
walked in.
Mr. Hendrickson, if you want to go ahead and speak and then sign up afterwards.
Good evening, John Hendrickson, 5919 Northeast 202nd Lane in Kenmore. The Open Public Meetings Act, was established so that, that as the council is doing the people's business, it assures that you recognize that you're responsible to us to be open and transparent in your dealings in doing the people's business. The opening language of that act in RCW 4230.010 says that it is the intent of this chapter that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give the public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments that they have created. And so we raised this issue back in December about the ball fields up at St. Ed's and whether or not there was a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. The public never learned about it until January of 2016, but the city appears to be working on it from September of 2015 and earlier. The email that we have from Doug Levy with Brent Smith, he talks about that, this was back on September 30th of 2015, that Daniels, let me see it here. We know that from Kevin Daniels, he's not going to want to be the financier of the ball fields. He fully understands, Mr. Daniels fully understands and fully expects to see the city weave the ball field in to the hotel development. Okay, so if he understands that, that's coming from you folks most likely. At the same time, Councilmember Danuski praised this email, saying, we're getting many emails in favor of the ball fields, nicely organized. Okay, so you guys know that you're working on a development back in September of 2015, but you're not telling the public who might have concerns about the environment up there. Again, in January, 4 months later, Brent Smith wrote, regarding the city pursuing control of the St. Ed's ball fields, this issue has only recently been public. And there's been considerable focus on the seminary rehab, but I'm pleased that we've gotten off to a good start. I do expect opposition to build, as you know. It's on our council's agendas this evening. I hope some of the field supporters can come and attend. So Brent's rallying people to come down, and he's celebrating that the people, you're ahead of the game. So it's, instead of complying with the Growth and Open Public Meetings Act, you're acting in an adversarial manner, it appears. So during your meetings, you guys discussed that you have one-on-ones with the city manager. So you discussed these. This could be considered like a phone tree. And you also had phone conversations between yourselves in one of the council meetings. Brent Smith and Nigel talked about that they had a phone conversation. So that's two.
Excuse me, Mayor, we're at 3 minutes. I'm sorry the equipment's not working tonight.
So what I would suggest is that maybe have Nigel do an independent study, get statements under penalties of perjury, see how many of you guys were talking about this, 4 or more. Because when it came up, you guys were all on the ball. Alan, David, this came up in November of 2015. You're going to change the PAW. You're going to go with these ball fields. We already worked through this in 2008, and it failed. We lost like $290,000. You guys didn't say anything. So it looks like you all knew about it. So why don't we put a report together and make sure we're complying with the Open Public Meetings Act, or maybe we're not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. Anybody else wishing to be heard? John, if you'd please sign up. Anybody else wishing to be heard? All right, Mr. Adamant, thank you very much for your comments, and we appreciate your being here in attendance. Ms. Anderson, City Manager, can you please respond to the request that she had, here with the next couple of weeks?
Sure. Thanks, Nancy.
And also, can you do whatever is necessary to answer Mr. Hendrickson's concerns?
I can do my best.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda then is consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda is business agenda and Squires Landing Restoration Grant. Ms. Bent.
Good evening, Council. So we're here tonight to look for your direction with regard to whether to move forward with proceeding with the restoration project with the Corps of Engineers. If there are any questions that come up regarding the core portion of the funding, John Hicks is in the audience with the Corps of Engineers, so we do have an expert on that program.
Okay, you've talked him into coming up.
So we were before you on December 5th to give you some background information on the program, on the proposal for the restoration, and you asked for some additional time. It was a retreat item agenda last Friday, and knowing that tonight is the decision, we asked John whether there is a possibility to extend the decision further, and I think the short answer is no. At this point, he is under the gun from the people above him, saying they really need an answer. So really, we are before you tonight looking for your direction. So I will keep it at that because you've already heard the background presentation in December. I have nothing really further to add, and we're here to answer any questions before you take action. Thank you.
Questions? Councilmember Sperry.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. So I'm still trying to understand this. And as you may know, we recently passed a bond, Walkways and Waterways, and this park is one of the key water access projects. And when I was looking through some of the background information, you refer to a specific section that this project would be, this core project would be authorized under, in terms of, there's a number, and I don't have it in front of me.
1135.
1135, and the idea would be to restore back or to deal with like some of the dredging that had created the little hill and changed the shoreline and things like that. And so one of my thoughts was that was really interesting in terms of with the type of changes that we'd like to make to the park to increase the waterfront access. If there is some way to align that authority where you're actually restoring something that was changed by the Corps, if that would be something that could be utilized, whether or not we go ahead with this particular opportunity.
The authority that this was initiated on is the Continuing Authorities Program, Section 1135. Mm-hmm. And it's specifically for restoration types of projects. And it actually is used all over the United States. It's used pretty frequently. In regard to aligning some of the changes that you hope to make, I'm not fully up to speed on the types of changes that you're thinking of making, but I do know that through the last couple years that we've been working through this process, we've been talking about a very specific scope that has made it through various levels of review. I know that your park plans are evolving from what I hear, which is great that's the case. But it's really hard for us to hit a moving target and to make sure that is actually going to comply with the 1135 statute that we have, or not statute, the authority that we have. So,
okay, sure.
I really don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
But thank you. No, that was helpful. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Councilmember Danuski.
When I was reading the bill, the council bill, it kind of suggested that we didn't need to make a decision today, that if we decided no right now, this funding would be available at a later time. Is that not true?
Okay, the place that we are on this was initiated quite a while ago, and it's really been in a stopped mode for about a year, roughly. Trying to think the best way to put this. The Continuing Authorities Program, the CAP program, the 1135 portion of that program is expected to continue as long as Congress feels that it is a worthwhile program. And last time I was up on the Hill, they very strongly support this all the way. Even people you wouldn't expect, because it's a great program type of thing. There is a certain pot of money on a national basis that is authorized and is appropriated for, and basically it's a pot, and that pot has pretty much been kept full for years and years and years. If you would not make a decision on this at this point, we would likely terminate the project. And when you felt that you understood exactly what you wanted to do with the property and had that a little bit better defined, then we could reinitiate it at this point. But we've essentially spent, almost $80,000 so far developing the initial scope. And have been working for years. And the way that it works in the feasibility portion of this is the first $100,000 is paid for 100% by the federal government, and then everything past that is matched. It would require a certain match, and each of the authorities had different percentages to match it. If you would, and I don't want to be the heavy, because that's not my nature. I've worked with Mayor Baker on a few projects in the past, and used to visit me in D.C. But on a practical basis, what the space that is being held for this project is in demand for other people in the United States to use. So if you would decide not make a decision to do it, or not give us the assurance that you are planning on funding and moving forward with this, as I mentioned, we would terminate the project. And if you needed to initiate it again in a year or 2 years, That's fine. If you're going to stop, now is a good time before there's any more federal money that's invested in it. As I had mentioned to, I believe it was to Nancy Osley, as well as also Ms. Bent, is if for whatever reason you decide to stop now, it's not held against you. Contrary to popular opinion, we do not have a black book, and there's not marks on it. We just don't do it that way. It's not the way we work. So, but anyway, on a practical basis, now's really the time. And I was able to stave off termination a month, so that's why I'm here. So I just want to make sure that if you have any questions, and hopefully I can answer them. But you have to do what's in the interest of your city and of your community.
Okay. I have a lot of I'd like to do this project. We have
Sure.
a lot of unfunded things in our budget, like ball fields and Twin Springs Park and operations and maintenance, and not knowing what mitigation we need. So, I actually have quite a few more questions, but I'll let other people go first and then
Okay.
come back to me.
Well, and on a practical basis, what we have seen with municipalities in particular, and even with state governments, when there's trying to balance budgets and things like that, I mean, there was one who will go unnamed. They basically said, policeman or this project, and they chose the policeman. I can't fault them for that. It's so I fully understand how you have to keep things in balance.
Okay, I'll let other people go and then ask more.
Deputy Mayor, and then Councilmember Curtis.
In our discussion on Friday, a number of questions came to light, and I've been advocating for the city to take advantage of what you have offered, but I couldn't answer all these questions. And one of the most basic ones is this a project of the Corps of Engineers alone, or is it a joint project between the city and the Corps? And what kind of influence do we have on how the project is done and what the end product is, and so on? But we might start right there. You said you've invested $8,000 in the original.
$80,000.
Huh?
$80,000.
$80,000 in developing the scope of the project. Now, can you tell us what the scope of the project is for that $80,000, and where are we at this point?
Sure. Boy, that was one question?
Well, I've got more.
I understand.
A lot more.
One question with bullets. But the way that it works is the project is actually owned by the Corps of Engineers. The sponsor, which you would be the sponsor, the non-federal sponsor, has an amazing amount of influence and can certainly move things a lot of different directions. We're working on, for example, with Clallam County on a restoration at Dungeness. And on that project in particular, the county, as for their match on the project, what they are doing is they're basically running the project with their consultants in consultation with us. So it's basically it has to meet our requirements, and our we do have check boxes, and it has to make sure that it meets that. But as part of the cost sharing portion of it, basically their consultant team is doing a lot of the design. Actually, they're up almost at 65% of the design at this point. That's part of their share, and but it is still a core project because essentially what it is when you get down to the construction end of things, the authority is from Congress to us. It's not really Congress to you. So that's the reason we maintain the oversight of it. And some cases we're very involved. In other cases we're not as involved, but we still have to make our mark. We still have to make sure that it meets our requirements. Okay. So what has been done for the almost 80,000? We certainly have met and communicated with the city numerous times about scope and things like that. We have developed trying to think what it's actually called. We have done a federal interest determination report, which is the first step, because if a lot of people can ask and say, hey, we are interested in having this performed, but it has to be determined that it's in the federal interest, not just a city, not just a municipal or a state interest. We also developed a project management plan, which is, it was finished in September of 2015. And it was basically, how is the project going to be run? What are the approximate costs? What are the timelines? What are some of those types of things? So we've had economists, we've had engineers, we've had hydrologists, a variety of people, project management, a lot of it, attorneys even. So that's really what we've done at this point. What we do when we enter into when there's actually funding that is provided by a non-federal sponsor, we have meetings. In some cases, it's once-a-month meetings. In other cases, it's quarterly or even yearly meetings that say, this is where we are. This is how much money's been spent. These are the tasks that have been completed. This is what we're going to need from you, the municipality, to do this. This is where we are in the negotiations with the environmental agencies, because the projects have to be environmentally cleared and all that, and so on and so on and so on.
Your Honor, I have a follow-up question to that, if that's all right.
Sure.
So this federal interest determination report that you've already completed,
yeah.
Well, let's say that we don't move forward now, but in a year or two we might want to move forward. Will you have to redo that federal interest determination report?
Actually, it'll have to be refreshed, but necessarily redoing it, no. As long as the scope hasn't changed markedly, whereas opposed to restoring, 1,000 acres, you go down to 10 or something like that. Maybe it would, but in the case of the however you're going to be using the properties, no. We'll touch it, but it's not going to be a huge amount of effort for us. The biggest thing that tends to change is the economics. As far as looking at the economics, is it economically justified? What's it actually cost? What's the cost of doing this? What's the cost of doing that? Those change all the time, as you've experienced. It's a good question, sir.
I'll let others. I have a number of questions.
Go that way.
And Councilmember Curtis.
So I'll limit my questions to a few, and then we'll keep going through them.
Okay.
Kind of related to some that we just did. So it sounds like the $80,000 that's been spent, we wouldn't waste it if we decided to delay it this time. Have a question on contaminants. So were any studies done to see what's in the stuff that was dumped on that property? Because it could, in my mind, to restore a wetland delta to its natural state would have great value. But can you just move stuff around, take it out of here and pile it up here, or do you have to haul it off? And then if it's contaminated, how much does that cost? So any information on contaminants?
Yeah, that would be something that would be approached in the environmental document when we get to the design and implementation end of there's two phases. There's feasibility and then design and implementation. We will have touched it, so we'll have an idea of what's going on in the feasibility. In the continued part of the feasibility, we'll know. And by that time, if it's suspected that there are contaminants, no matter what they are, type of thing, we will have at least had an idea that they're there, and likely would be talking to the resources agencies, Department of Ecology, DNR, whoever it needs to be, about what would need to be done with those things. I mean, before you're moving anything, as you well know, you have to pretty much know what you're moving, and you don't want to spread the contamination around. But we definitely would be looking at that.
Because the reason I asked the question is my biggest concern is we'll get partway down the road, it will end up turning to cost way more than we expected, and then we're on the hook for it.
True.
So if you don't even know some of these things, like is there any contamination before you're well in, sounds like you're past the feasibility study before you really know. And can you like stop at some point and say, whoa, this is just like way too expensive, or we've turned up some information that makes this, we got to stop here?
Sure. On a national basis, that happens, unfortunately, too frequently. And we try to anticipate as much of that as possible. Yeah, there's, as we say in the navigation world, there's dragons down there sometimes, and you don't know what you're going to hit. That's fully understandable. If, like in the existing conditions, if by chance there was contaminated material that had been placed by whomever there, that would likely be something that we would at least try to anticipate, and perhaps. And we would certainly investigate it before we would start digging. I mean, it's just if you have any thought that there's any bad things there, we certainly would have to do it. It would not be in the best interest of anyone to open a contaminated can of worms.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that part? It's good to see you again, Mr. Hicks.
And you too, sir.
On that particular subject, if we uncovered contaminants, we couldn't just cover it back up again.
Nope.
We'd have to get rid of it.
My grandmother used to say, you killed it, you clean it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've read two or three different times in this document that we are responsible for disposal.
That is true.
So if we found anything contaminated, that's not a match. That we are responsible for its disposal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just clarification. Did you have anything else?
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say we did find something contaminated. The Corps wouldn't help with that disposal cost?
We could provide, wisdom and some guidance, but as far as the cost of disposal, of removal and disposal, that would be on the non-federal sponsor. Or, as some people do, they would, have like a Department of Ecology grant or something like that they would do. But the responsibility would be the non-federal sponsor, which would be the city.
Okay, well, we wouldn't necessarily have to remove it or dispose of it. We could leave it in place.
You could.
We can work with Department of Ecology on just leaving it in place.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, there are times and again, this is not an environmental cleanup authority. This is a restoration authority. But there are times that that there are projects that go along and then they stop and they hop over 100 feet and then they keep going simply for that reason, just because it's too expensive to do anything with it. So yeah, you can certainly leave it in the ground. But I would certainly talk to Department of Ecology or EPA, depending on the nature of the contaminant and the levels.
But generally, once it's discovered, you just can't turn your back on it and walk away.
No, I'm not saying necessarily that you can, but if you, like for example, I'll talk about the thing I know the most about, which is navigation. There are many channels in the United States that are only partially dredged, specifically because there's contaminated material. And I'm not pointing at any particular channel, but just there's many of them. I mean, there's hundreds of them. There's parts of New York, New Jersey harbor that could not be dredged because of the contaminant levels and what was there. I mean, they basically changed their plans so they didn't have to open up a multi hundreds of millions of dollar cleanup.
Councilmember Kurtz, did you have something else on that?
I'm okay. I'm good.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you for being here. I have just a couple of questions. You answered the one on the 1 year approximately after the FIDR, I believe, is completed. you go through a minor process. What happens if it was like 2 to 4 years out before funding? Is that an issue, or is that still?
It would actually be the same process. It's just basically wanting to make sure that that whatever numbers were used to help make the decision are accurate. I mean, things change.
Okay.
Things change, people change. So we just want to make sure that things are as accurate as possible when we relook at things. And there's another project for the city of Seattle that we realized that the cost estimate was done in 2014. It's out of date. So before we moved to the next step, we just had to refresh that. So cost engineers went through and looked at it again.
Okay, and in the
not a huge effort.
And in the completion of that, is part of the creation within that feasibility phase, does that also include a full project outline of what ongoing maintenance of something like this consists of, or what needs to happen to make sure that we don't in any way retreat backwards?
It can certainly touch on the ongoing maintenance. Remember, the maintenance is the responsibility of the sponsor.
Right, and that's actually why I asked.
And that's I figured that's you want to know how big the hook is at the end, and that's the just a slight aside to help explain it. That with the Army Corps of Engineers, the majority of the monies that are spent are not for building things right now. It's in the operations and maintenance side. It's the tail, so to speak. It was built. Something was built, like the Hiram M. Chittenden locks were built 100 years ago. Now it's just it's maintaining it, and it's really expensive at this point. So I think it would be touched on, but I do think that it would probably be in the design and implementation. We go through a what's called a PED, which is the plans and the engineering and the design part. We would probably have a better idea as far as what the O&M is or the operating and maintenance tail would be at that time. Feasibility, probably have an idea, but it won't really be defined, and it won't be backed by much more than, well, based on my experience, this is what I've seen. Whereas in the PED portion of it, that's done with engineering and the latest science and all that sort of good stuff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Herbig.
So if we were to move forward with this and do a feasibility study, could we then use the feasibility study to identify kind of a most sensitive or most beneficial pieces of land that we could restore within a budget? Instead of committing ourselves to going whole hog right now, could we pick out the places where we think we'd get the best ecological bang for the buck and move forward with that?
I see. So you're thinking of it as an optimization step?
Well, I'm thinking of this as a small city with a limited budget and other priorities, and I think this is really important. I think that the ecological benefit to the Sammamish River and Lake Washington is important, and I'd like to get as much of that as possible.
Sure.
And I think the park itself is great and could use all of this work. But at the end of the day, we're trying to pay the bills, and we have other things that we need to be doing. And as important as I think this is, as much as I'd like to do all of this, that may not be where we're able to go at the end of the day. So if we were able to identify, X number of dollars worth of improvements that we could partner with the Corps on and move forward with that within kind of what's identified in the feasibility study, would that be a realistic path for us?
It is. It's a path that others have taken. It's not the optimum path, but it is something that others have taken. But your portion of the feasibility is about $250,000, roughly. So it's $250,000, and it's the federal government portion is larger than that. But nonetheless, It's an approach that I've seen used in a couple of places. It's not highly recommended, but, the ultimate thing, before there's a project partnership agreement that gets signed when you're going into the design and implementation, or excuse me, Yeah, design and implementation phase. And, with that, it lays it out very specifically, and but that's a ways down. I mean, that's past the feasibility into the next phase.
So what does the timeline look like on this? If we were to move forward, what would the timeline look like for the feasibility study? And then how many years spread out would the restoration take? Just ballpark.
The entire project, when it was originally scoped, it figured it would be about a 4-year project, 4 years, as long as funding and everything was funding in progress was good. Well, the last year's been kind of stalled. So, back of the envelope at this point, we're thinking, 18 months, year and a half to 2 years to finish up the feasibility side. There's still a fair amount of work. The total amount for the feasibility is around $600,000. We've only just barely dipped into it, but then we start spending a lot of money, trying to, optimize some of the early designs and things like that. So,
thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up to that question as well?
Sure.
This is my way of
I'm seeing a trend
in here. Yeah.
So am I.
So we had asked a similar question, Councilmember Herbig, just before the meeting, because we said, well, what if during the feasibility period we just identify a smaller project within the site, say maybe 5 acres or 10 acres, and so we can get the city match down. You kind of discouraged that, and I think what I heard you say was we get one bite at the apple, meaning if we scoped it down to a small project, it would be hard for us to come back to the Corps in the future to do the rest. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you would scope it to being an acre, let's just say, and that gets built out and everything else, and then you want to make it bigger, then you start the process over and go through it again. It's not as easy to expand it. It was my hope that we could optimize some things like that. It hasn't really happened yet. There is a new administration in town, so we'll see how that all shakes out as far as optimizing and cutting some of our timelines and things like that. It's a real possibility.
Councilmember Danuski.
Quite a few of my questions got answered. I was kind of hoping there would be a way to scope it down a little. It sounds like that's not maybe as optimal. I guess I wish we had had this discussion during the budget discussion, because it's so incredibly expensive, and I don't know if I said yes now. I guess it's more of a comment than a question. What are we cutting? If we say yes to $2 million, what are we not going to do? And I feel like we haven't had a good conversation on that yet. So I guess that's one way I hesitate. And I'll let other people go while I think of my next question.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Regarding our matching funds, there's been some question as to whether things like grants, salmon recovery grants that might be available, and you had referred to Department of Ecology or EPA kinds of funding might help. Will those qualify as matching funds for the city?
Just for clarity's sake, the EPA, not so much. If it's federal money?
Not so much or not at all?
If it's federal money, those generally are not counted. If it is a grant from like restoration grant by Department of Ecology, that's fine. If it's a grant from a nonprofit agency, that's fine. If it's federal money, the answer, and I'm referring over to the City Council, is the favorite thing of attorneys is it depends. And that's really what it, yeah, sorry, sir. I couldn't help it. I work with attorneys a lot. And it really does depend on the color of the money and things. It's disallowed to essentially double dip on what appropriated monies are. So what I was told, I said, can you give me some definition as far as which monies would apply and which ones wouldn't? And this came up, I was asking about the property. If the property was purchased by an EPA grant, let's just say, would you as the municipality be able to use the credit for in-kind work based on the value of the property? And the answer would be no. If simply because it was federal money, you can't use that to get more federal money per se.
Was this property federal property? Did we get it from the federal government?
I don't believe you did.
No?
I'm not exactly sure, sir.
Okay. What about our walkways and waterways bond issue that was recently passed? We're going to invest $10 million approximately into 11 acres of this 40.
Sure. That was a municipal bond, right, that you did? That's fine.
Okay. So now what percent? I mean, could we say the whole $10 million is part of our match, or?
I need to check.
Or do we have to look at the amount that goes towards restoration? How about mitigation that we might have to do in order for this project?
I don't know what the exact, and I apologize for not being prepared as far as the exact amount of the match, but there are projects that we're doing under other different authorities that essentially allow 100% of the value of the property to be used for in-kind services. So that are in-kind work. So that is allowed, but under 1135, I don't actually know the amount. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that doesn't help.
Just a quick follow-up on the grant thing. Sure. If the State Department of Ecology gave us grant money for that, and that grant money was transferred through from the feds, is that allowable?
There is grant money from ecology, if it's given like a block grant or something like that. Yep. Generally, that's fine. It's just, it can't be designated for this property, for example.
Okay. You had mentioned, you made the statement that if you killed it, you clean it.
Sorry.
Okay.
It came from Ellensburg.
No. Okay. We may be initiating this project in that we've approached you back in, I think, 2010, somewhere in there originally. But it was the Corps of Engineers that dumped all the dirt there and planted the reed canary grass. So now who originated the need for this project?
Boy, that's something that I really don't know how to answer. If you're asking us to pay your portion of
the
it too.
last time the river and the harbor was dredged was 1997.
I seem to recall that.
And it was before we were in a city.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's dredged there.
That's the last time it was dredged. And the dredged material then was carted up the river and on either side of Swamp Creek and dumped in, and the swamp filled in. The banks of Swamp Creek and the river are steep banks, not the gradual banks that are healthy for habitat.
Well,
the question I said is, you killed it, we didn't.
Well, in that case, then we can just terminate the project, sir.
No,
I mean,
what are the 1135 funds for?
I'm sorry?
What are the 1135 funds for?
It's for restoration, doing environmental restoration projects.
For just environmental restoration
or
for
aquatic
restoration
ecosystems.
of things that the Corps was involved in previously?
If it was, if there are authorities for, if there are things that were caused by the Army Corps of Engineers in the maintenance of a navigation project, there are other authorities that seem to apply to that. And they're not.
This doesn't apply to that?
That does apply to.
Okay, that's what 1135 funds are for.
No, that's not what it's a different authority than 1135.
Okay, then maybe we're looking at the wrong bunch of funds. And maybe
perhaps. I don't know, sir. But if you're saying that the reason that you're in this pickle is because of the Corps of Engineers dredging that occurred, then I think that's another discussion that would need to be escalated.
Well, that's what's made it unnatural. That's what's changed the habitat. And that's why we need to restore it. We need to restore it back to its original. And the reason it's the way it is that the Corps of Engineers dumped the dredging materials there and then planted reed canary grass because that was the in thing to do at the time. And now it's all over the place.
That's not part of the restoration area now.
Sure it is. There's reed canary grass down there. It's non-native species. Isn't that part of it? No, both sides. It's all over the place. Well, so, I have questions about where the uncertainty, so many uncertainties in this whole project.
There are.
It really, and then the business of cost overruns. If we determine that it's going to cost us more money to dispose of dirt or whatever, then all those overruns are on our nickel. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay.
Councilmember Curtis.
So if I understand, kind of the bottom line is we need to make a decision like either tonight or really, really soon. And in my ideal world, I have enough information to make good decisions, and it doesn't feel to me like I have that. Particularly like where would the city come up with the $2 million?
Right.
You know, also in my ideal world, I focus on like the fish-bearing areas, so along Swamp Creek and along Sammamish, and it's kind of the areas where it's flat and fairly dead and a lot of weeds. I kind of ignore those areas. So to be wasting money, kind of like Councilman Herberg mentioned, if we could focus on the areas that would give us the most bang for our buck, that would be nicer. But it just feels like there's a lot of unknowns.
Sure.
And I understand that's our job as leaders to make decisions sometimes with insufficient information. But I appreciate so much the information that you have shared with us. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. And if I may actually say something, sir, to Mr. Van Ness, if you are pointing the finger at the Army Corps of Engineers for doing this, then I fully expect that you would provide a letter to that, to that end, that we could then work through our Office of Counsel, and I'm sure we would have a lot of council conversations about, simply about that. If in fact the issue is because of the dredging that was done. And that was for Kenmore Channel, right? Or was that for the Sammamish? Okay.
I think it was.
Got it. Okay. So anyway, but sir,
that the Section 1135 funds were for those kinds of things, but they're not. They're for restoration projects.
They're for aquatic
ecosystem.
ecosystem.
Has not been involved at all in the past. Is that right?
In most cases, yeah, that is correct. Right.
Although to kind of chime in there, it does say in the Federal Interest Determination Report, it does describe those two actions about dredging the lowering the lake levels and also the dredge. So it recognizes that there were some actions that caused degradation at that site, and that's why it was kind of pointed out then that this funding was appropriate for restoration. But I don't know if there's a way to kind of fully put the restoration on the Corps, if that's where you were leading.
Well, there is a continuing authorities section. It's section 111. It's shore damage prevention or mitigation caused by federal navigation projects. Is that what you might be thinking of?
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I've
Anyway,
just been told that the Corps planted the reed canary grass, and they did that after they disposed of the spoils from the dredging. And the contours of the land are totally different than they were when it was a swamp.
So
the only intervention has been the Corps of Engineers.
And and the non-federal sponsor was King County, who I believe still is.
Still is.
Yeah. What did they say?
For the dredging.
For the dredging.
King County,
Yeah.
King County is, yes.
Yep.
right. But have they brought up anything about the canary
No,
grass and things like
They've
that?
pretty much stayed away from the whole thing.
Yeah, that property's all been transferred to us now.
Oh, it has?
The property has been transferred to us.
Property's been transferred, but the river and the channel
Gotcha.
remain King County's
Gotcha,
sponsor.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other question I had was that this diminishes our bond issue, Walkways and Waterways, diminishes the size of the project by 11 acres, from 40 down to 29.
Okay.
And that would significantly decrease the scope of the project, the
Mm-hmm.
cost of the project, our matching funds for the project as well, right? And you are saying, let me make sure I got this correct, that you're saying that how much of our investment in that 11 acres could be counted as matching funds, but it's uncertain at this point. What would qualify for that?
Yeah, I again apologize for not having that. I don't remember what that figure is, and I didn't bring my documentation with me.
Okay.
In regard to that, if I would have known that was a question, I would have prepared. I'm sorry, sir.
But it's,
Councilmember Sperry, do you have anything further?
I don't. I mean, I guess, Councilmember Curtis talked about his perfect world, and I think in my perfect world, we would have conversations between the Army Corps and the different environmental agencies and see how we could work together to restore this. And of course, with the project that our voters have just approved, or at least wanting to make waterfront access on Squires Landing is in my mind a very important thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that is going to require mitigation. And what I've been told is that none of this, if we choose to go forward, it would count on that aspect.
That is true.
Yeah. So.
what is true?
You can't double count mitigation.
You can't count the mitigation.
Double count.
Double count.
Double. Okay.
Do it for the 1135 project as well as then for the regulatory
Are matching
mitigation.
funds mitigation? If we were to contribute dollars, that's not mitigation. But does the mitigation that we do on our bond issue project in those lands, does that count as matching?
No.
No, that's
That's
the
outside
answer
of the
for no.
project. And we have not been really in the loop as far as what your plans were, as far as the bond that you passed.
Mm-hmm.
We've not had much communication at all. We've tried, but we've had none. Not much, at least, minimum. Right?
So,
because I think in 2015 when the Corps approached us, it was at that point, right at the same time where we were trying to develop a scope for the concept at Squires Landing. So we said, we don't even know what we want to do at Squires Landing, so we need to wait, and that was communicated.
Right.
We finished the concept plan, and at that point then we said, well, we have a concept plan. The question now is whether we want to move forward with it, and we won't know that till mid-2016, which was true, when Council decided, let's take this forward. And then I said, well, we won't know if this is still going to be a project when it goes to the voters. So we've kind of communicated what the time frame would have been for this project. The problem right now is now we know somewhat what the concept plan is for Squires Landing. On that project, we're still unclear on if there's additional mitigation area that we need for Squires Landing, and we've communicated that. Right. But unfortunately, we are pushing up against the deadline with the Corps for proceeding with this project. So as much as we've tried to kind of align these two things as we can, unfortunately, we're at a point now where one needs to either move forward or not.
So, I know okay, go ahead.
Well, just one or two of you mentioned you wouldn't know where the $2 million would come from. I'm confident that you could quite easily actually find the $2 million, especially if you have the next 24 months or so to save up for it. There's money in real estate excise tax. There's park impact fees. There's your Strategic Opportunities Fund.
Is that $2 million that could be used for the ball fields?
So that's the other part of what I was about to say is you have competing resources, including needing to find money for the ball field. So if you really wanted to do this project, could you find $2 million, especially since you have 2 years to save up for it? Yes. But we're also trying to fund things like ball fields, and so finding $2 million for this just means pushing off other unfunded projects.
So using priority-based budgeting, where does a project like this fit in our priority-based budgeting model?
We'd have to run it through the model.
Okay. So back in 2008, we were back there at headquarters. It was Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Van Ness and myself, and I think you were there. You were there. Maybe it was you, because you were Deputy Mayor at the time, and Councilmember Rogers. Anyway, we started talking about 1135. And I know in about 2009, I think it was, and perhaps the Assistant City Manager can verify my memory on this, I was told to stop talking about 1135, that we weren't going to talk about that anymore. So I'm a little bit surprised to see 1135 come up again. And I first found out about this again back last March, I think it was, when I was back at CORE headquarters, and Deputy Mayor was with me, and we had this discussion about this. And I know that they were saying back then that we were responsible for cost overruns, we were responsible for disposal of contaminated dredge materials and everything else, and that we don't know the full cost of the project until we do the evaluation, and we could be on the hook for a substantial amount of money. And so that is very, very concerning to me, especially since we just went for a bond rating and we just had the first bond funded, and we're going to have to go back in a couple years, if I'm not mistaken, and have another bond. That's been approved by the voters. So we've got to go through that process again. And if we have this huge debt looming over our heads, I don't know how favorably the bond community will look at this. But if we spend $250,000 now, can we just stop, or are we on the hook?
You can stop up until you do the project partnership agreement, the PPA. And so if you would spend the $250,000 now, it has been done where people will stop before signing the PPA that basically says this is the document between the federal government and the municipality or the non-federal sponsor. Some have jumped at that point.
So I know that a lot of the dredge materials were put up there, and I know that peninsula there is all dredge material. So in the restoration project, will a lot of that dredge material go away?
I don't know.
Okay. I guess that's all that comes to mind right now. Councilmember Herbig.
So Kenmore has a fairly vibrant community of parks volunteers who do a lot of really great work in our parks. If we were to get a bunch of our volunteers down there to help with some of the work, say weed pulling, I don't know what, I'm not an expert in this, but to get down there and help with some of the work, could we count that towards our match, the volunteer hours?
It is, as long as they were overseen, not from as long as they were overseen by the non-federal sponsor, which would be you. Yeah, that's, but before you would do it, you need to talk to us and say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing, and we'll say, well, this is what the approximate value is. Come to agreement on that before you, invest the resources or political capital to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Other question?
Go for it.
Will this feasibility study, include a determination of financial responsibilities? In other words, would we know more about our financial, how big this blank check's going to be by the time the feasibility study's completed? Or will we just know about what's involved in moving the dirt and plants and so on? Is the feasibility study just concerned with the actual process of cleaning up the site and doing the stuff to the site, or are there financial implications and conclusions that come out of the feasibility study?
There is essentially the first order of costs that would be further refined when it goes into the next phase, which is the PED phase for the plans and the engineering and things that might fine-tune it. But you'll have a much better idea at the end of the feasibility as far as what you're going to be on the hook for, although that will finally be negotiated in the partnership agreement.
When does a partnership agreement become final? When is that done?
The
At the end of
partnership-
feasibility or down the line even further?
It's actually past feasibility. In the feasibility, it can reach a point that in the feasibility, it might come out that it's actually not feasible to do the project.
From a physical, mechanical process
or even a fiscal,
or a financial one?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, there's some things that people would like to do, and it's not possible to do, or it's not possible to do it responsibly, we'll just say, from a financial perspective, or perhaps there'll be environmental issues that would preclude the way that things are normally done. It would and make it cost prohibitive or time prohibitive or special permitting, requirements.
Okay.
Councilmember Curtis, yes.
So looking at the agenda item, it looks like what you need tonight is council direction on whether to proceed with the restoration project. Are you specifically looking for a motion and a second? Okay, I would like to make a motion that we not proceed with this at this time, that we appreciate the $80,000 and the information it's gained us, and as we look at priorities in the future and finances and look at how we might be able to come up with our $2 million, that we might be interested in re-engaging in the project.
I'm not going to second that.
So the short answer is I'd make a motion that we not proceed at this time.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion. Councilmember Herbig.
I'll be voting against this motion. I think that we have, I'm not going to say once in a generation, but we have a fairly rare opportunity to clean up a very ecologically sensitive city property that has a huge influence on the Sammamish River, on Swamp Creek, on Lake Washington, and I think we would be foolish not to at least move forward with the feasibility study to get us a better idea of what we're saying yes or no to right now. I realize it's not, even the $250,000 is not a small investment, but it could be considered a strategic investment. It's something that we could fund out of our strategic operations fund to at least give us a better understanding of what we are saying yes or no to. I think saying no this early is saying no right now is almost as irresponsible as saying yes and cutting a check for the entire project. We don't have enough information to move forward or not. So I'll be voting no.
Will the study, this feasibility study, will it test for soil contaminants? And will we know for sure at the end of this feasibility study whether or not we're going to have uplands disposal on stuff? Or
it will not.
This will come out later.
It will come out later in the engineering and the design because in the engineering design portion, it'll be, okay, the city and the Corps, we want to cut this out, we want to lay this bank back, we want to move this material, we want to keep this material, we want to mound this, these are the plants and things like that. All of that, that's when the soil borings, that's when all of that would occur, but not during the feasibility.
Cost overruns during feasibility study. Feasibility study, we're on the hook for $250,000, that's it, period. There won't be cost overruns or anything during feasibility.
It is our hope that that would be what it is, but and generally it is. We don't tend to do cost overruns on the feasibility on the first phase very often at all, and I can't see this being one of those things. Although it has happened,
I guess my hesitation is coming from the fact that we know from testing that the channel and that area out around the channel is contaminated. And we know that all those dredge materials, that's where it came from. So I'm a little bit concerned about contamination, and I'd sure would like to know a whole lot more before we moved on. So anything else?
Okay,
Deputy Mayor.
One quick question. I get that, and I think if I was in the Corps' shoes, I wouldn't want to proceed with a feasibility study if the city of Kenmore wasn't gung-ho to follow through with the whole thing. At the same time, in the city of Kenmore, do we want to even invest the $250,000 with all these questions that are hanging over our heads? It's essentially we're signing sure, we can stop it at some point in the future, but it's essentially a blank check. I was hoping we'd have a few more answers to our questions here tonight, but until we get into it deeper and invest in it, we're not going to get those answers. And
and if we say no tonight, there's no black mark against us, and if we want to come back in a year or two and say, let's open this again, we certainly can do it.
That is true, sir.
Okay.
And just to reinforce that, I checked with the Northwest Division, that basically our bosses in Portland, and they said, no, that's fine. I talked to headquarters, because I know some of the people there, and they said, nope, now's the time. Now is the best time, optimum time. And you know, I guess I didn't know that you, as far as your plans, as far as what you want to do with the 11 acres or whatever, I wasn't sure that was, you know, how formed that was or not. I mean, that's all news to me. So.
Okay. Councilmember Smith.
Yes, I will be. I'll be voting in favor of the motion, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Hicks, for coming tonight, because I feel like I was leaning sort of against it ahead of time, and it was because of the breadth of funds that this was going to take. But I feel like with a lot of the comments you've clarified, or actually in some ways created more questions, it's actually helped me reach a decision easier, because I do see this with knowing the, you know, from project overruns to contamination to the lack of knowledge that we'll have even at the feasibility phase. I think that is really significant, because we're talking about what could easily be additional hundreds of thousands of dollars more, and that is a huge risk that we haven't even begun to contemplate the financial consequences of that. So I really appreciate you being here, because I do think it has actually added clarity in a lot of ways for me, and so thank you. And then with that, I also just want to say I do appreciate the work you've put into this and how far the Corps has come along in wanting to work with us on a project with an amazing match. It just isn't amazing enough, unfortunately.
I won't coach you, sir.
Councilmember Curtis.
I would just say that when we finish our 11 acres, we will know a lot more about that property. We'll have a pretty good idea if there's contamination. We'll know. We'll just have more information. So then I think if we come back around and say, okay, we're ready to do 30, there will be less uncertainty in my mind.
Can we as a city Or would you recommend or contemplate down the road a little bit, perhaps in the restoration there, the work we're going to do with Squires Landing, or perhaps doing a few soil samples to see what we might potentially be running into if we revive this in a year or two?
Let's talk about it.
I don't want to answer that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's
All
a
right.
whole separate issue.
Sure. Well,
And there's a motion on the table.
I realize that, and that was discussion. Because my big objection is not knowing. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, motion on the table is to stop. Do you want to restate the motion, Councilmember Curtis? Or the clerk?
The motion on the table is to not proceed with this project at this time.
All right. Clerk, take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
no.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
5-2.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I know we're going to see more of you.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you for
time.
your work.
You're welcome.
All right. Next item on the agenda
What's that?
is. Come on. Authorize city manager to execute agreements with the Washington State Department of Transportation, Puget Sound Regional Council, and Transportation Improvement Board for grants awarded in the 2016 grant application cycle.
What's with this thing?
That's really funny.
I was trying to get the right answer. No. Too big a blank check.
That was weird. Oh, it's all the way down.
I was
All right. Council members, Mr. Mayor. My name is Brett Schock, traffic engineer with the city. I have Chris Overlease, Public Works Director. And we're here to discuss the 2016 grant awards. I'm going to turn it over to Chris here in a second, but I just want to state again that the purpose here tonight is to get your approval for the authority to enter into agreements with the various grant agencies for the grants that we have been awarded or have been notified there is an intent to award for various transportation projects.
You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. In the 2016 grant cycle, there were a lot of calls for projects, and we were very aggressive and applied for 8 different transportation grants. Most of those were related to sidewalk projects with a bike component, although we did go after some funding for pavement preservation to help out with some of our overlay costs that are already budgeted. And then 2 of our applications were for just design and alternatives analysis as opposed to the full design and construction of sidewalk projects or pedestrian access projects. So of the 8 applications, 3 of the grants have been awarded. We don't have to wait any further for those. We know we have them. 2 of the grants are recommended for award by WashDOT, by the State Transportation Department, and they're awaiting approval by the Washington State Legislature of the funding levels that WashDOT anticipates for the programs that we were awarded. In addition, we do have the #1 project on the contingency list for one of WashDOT's programs. So if the legislature were to approve additional funding or one of the grant awardees ahead of us were to turn down their grant, we would be kind of first in line to add another successful project to our list. So here's a map of where we applied for projects. The top one there, let's see if this works. There you go. Northeast 202nd Street sidewalks project. That was actually something that we won in the 2014 grants cycle. We were awarded a $500,000 implementer level award by TIB for our complete streets, both because of our passage of the ordinance last fall and because of the strong ethic of pursuing complete streets types projects. TIB was very happy to award us their highest level, and we're intending to use that towards that project.
I'd like to crow about this money a little bit. Sorry, I'm still froggy. $500,000 is the most they gave out. They gave out just a handful of $500,000 level. And it's really an incentive program to be a multimodal ethic organization. So we received as much money as you can get from this very first time TIB program. I think it's amazing, and it's just a wonderful thing to be able to bring back to the city of Kenmore. And we were trying to, so it's $500,000 that TIB is giving us. They just give us the money. So it's not really a true grant. It's an incentive program. We choose where we put the money. So Rob, Joanne, and I talked quite a bit, and we chose to put the money into the 202nd sidewalk project that we're already planning on building, and that supplants $500,000 of REIT money. That REIT money goes back into the REIT pot. We did not discuss what that money could be done, but my priority was to spend the $500,000 efficiently and as quickly as possible. So should TIB offer this program again in the next year or two, we would be well positioned to have spent that money, spent it quickly and well, and we would be eligible the next time. If the money's not spent, we're not eligible next time. So that was our strategy and why we picked that project. It wasn't because the project was better than others. It had certain components. It really was about spending it quickly, and it is a good multimodal project. So with that, I'll let Brett keep going.
All right. And as Chris said, that one has a zero match from the city. That's just funds from TIB. Another one that we were successful with from TIB is through their urban sidewalk program, Northeast 181st Street on the north side between 65th and 67th Avenues. So across the street from the library. There's some sidewalk in that area, but it's not in great repair. It's not very consistent. So we're going to have a continuous sidewalk up to our current standards through that area thanks to this grant. There is a city match with that one. I think it's about a 2/3 grant, 1/3 city for the full project cost. The other one that we have already been awarded is some funds from the Puget Sound Regional Council to help cover the costs of some overlay on Simons Road, extending the overlay that we did this past summer and fall all the way to 155th Street and the Inglemore High School entrance. So as part of that, we will extend the buffered bike lane since we'll have a relocated center line. So that'll be our little complete streets element as part of that project. That one, again, is about, it has a city match, and that one's about 2/3 city funds and 1/3 grant funding.
I was going to add something for that preservation grant. This is the second time where we've been kind of the last project, so we didn't get all we asked for, but we got a couple $100,000, so we'll take it and be grateful.
Two of the WashDOT awards that are pending legislature approval. Juanita Drive, we applied for some design funding from 170th to 160th Street. So this will help to offset some of the costs for this piece of the project, which is also under the Walkways and Waterways. And then the other WashDOT award is from the Safe Routes to School program. This piece of sidewalk along Northeast 153rd Place near Arrowhead Elementary on the south side. Right now, there's sidewalk on the north side, and there's a little piece of sidewalk here on the south, but it's not consistent, and that's actually where most of the kids are walking, is on the south side of 153rd. So this will be continuous sidewalk on both sides from the RRFB crosswalk to the Juanita Drive signal where we did all the work to separate the pedestrians and the vehicles last year. And then the one project that's on the contingency list, the number one on the contingency list, is on Arrowhead Drive on the west side through the tree canopy here from the school up and around the curve in Arrowhead Drive. So that's another project that we hope, if things fall our way through the legislature, we might get that one as well.
And if I could just add to that, so if we, in our interactions with state legislators, could encourage them to expand this pot of money by just a little bit.
$83,000.
Yeah, $783,000.
To be precise.
I think it's pretty amazing that we're first on the contingent list. So if they fund it by just a little bit more, we're in. So Mayor Baker and others, those of you who interact with state legislators, if you could do what you can to help us encourage that expansion of that pot of money, that'd be great.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. If we don't get it this year, does our being first in line count for something if we apply for it next year?
As far as I'm aware, no, it does not.
Councilmember Curtis.
How big is the denominator? So how much is the total amount in the pool that we're asking to increase by $783,000?
I believe it's about 22 million.
So it's 3% or so.
Yeah.
35%.
3% doesn't sound like much.
So moving on into the money side of things, these are the awarded grants. As I said, there's a decent city match on both the 181st sidewalks and the Simons Road overlay money. It's about 2/3, 1/3 for the sidewalk grant, and then about 1/3 grant, 2/3 city money on the overlay. And then the Complete Streets funding was without any city match. For the two pending grants from WashDOT, they're both 90% grant funds, 10% city match. And then upon award, we will know whether these are being given from federal dollars or state dollars, which could be a consideration. The federalizing a project can add to some of the costs. So it's just something to consider if those do become federal monies.
Before you leave that one,
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand how 74 is 10% of 673.
The total project cost is $748,440.
Okay. And the same with the one below it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, good question. The Arrowhead Drive project is also a 90-10 split. So this is the full picture. For the ones that we know that we have, we're looking at a little over $2.5 million in grant funding, being matched by $1.15 million in city funds. If we get the contingency project as well, we'll have over $3.3 million in grant funding, matched by $1.24 in city match. Construction total could be as high as about $4.6 million.
So do we have that city, the match budgeted? Is that in the budget for next year?
All of the projects, even the one that's a contingency list grant, is in the CIP.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it has been budgeted for.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Councilmember Herbig.
Well, first off, I need to say great job. It seems like every year we get a report like this, and it's always exciting to see where other people's money is being spent in Kenmore. So I appreciate all of the work that goes into this and then the implementation. A related comment, though, and I think it's great that we got that TIB Complete Streets funding, and I think it's great. It's fine that we're spending it over at 202nd. I would, though, strongly urge that we make sure that we take that $500,000 that we reprogrammed from REIT, and that we make sure that we spend that on something else pedestrian related throughout the city. If we don't, if we take the REIT money that we already had programmed at 202nd, put it back into the general REIT funds, and then spend it on something unrelated, then what we've essentially done is taken TIB money and by changing the color of it, spent it on something completely different. And I understand that that's okay. I understand that TIB probably, that we'd be meeting everything that they want us to do. But I would hope that since we got additional funds to spend on pedestrian improvements, that we would continue to spend those additional funds on pedestrian improvements and not just reprogram the funds to, I don't know, parks or some other, town green, some other capital facility. Because I think that goes kind of against the spirit of the award in a small way. Again, though, I think it's great that we got that. Question for Rob. Have we already reprogrammed that REAP money? Is it already scheduled somewhere else?
Nope. That would need to come to you for your consideration if we were to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This is just my last slide, just bringing back the map. And again, we're recommending that the council authorize the city manager to execute the agreements for all 6 grants, including the contingent grant on Arrowhead Drive, we hope.
Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Great work.
Don't we need a motion? Yeah, please. We need you to please officially.
Oh, that's right. We have to
move
authorize the
and
city. Yes.
Hopefully say yes, so
Yes,
Rob
you're right.
can sign those
You're right.
things.
So we need a motion to authorize the city manager to execute agreements with the Washington State Department of Transportation, Puget Sound Regional Council, and the Transportation Improvement Grant for Transportation Improvement Board for grants awarded in the 2016 grant cycle.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Let's go ahead and take the roll on this one.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Good work on all this. Great,
Yeah,
thank
very
you.
good.
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This is the fun stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys, tremendous work. Okay. I'm not electric enough.
No, I don't know if there's nothing. Okay.
Amendments to the 2017 state agenda.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I have before you a very minor amendments to the state legislative agenda that you adopted in October. And after having the typical pre-session meetings with our delegation, and also due to some other developments, we're recommending 2 slight updates to the agenda that you adopted in October. One is with respect to the item of reconnecting Kenmore's downtown to Lake Washington for some sort of grade-separated crossing. We recommend changing the agenda to reflect some advice that we got from our delegation, given what's going on this session, to change the amount to $4 million and to focus that on design for a grade-separated crossing. The other one is to make a slight change to the boathouse capital budget request to be a little less specific about where that would be. We know that it's going to be on the Sammamish River somewhere. We just, want to leave some broader options open to us at this point. So those are the only 2 changes to the legislative agenda. We wanted to bring them back since this is the first day of the 2017 session. Any questions?
Hearing none, we need a motion to approve the updated 2017-19 legislative agenda.
So moved.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? This is an easy one. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, staff report.
I'll begin the staff report because today marked a big decision on the part of the State Parks Commission. The commission voted unanimously this morning to approve a lease with the Daniels Real Estate Group for the 5.5-acre lease area at St. Edward State Park, including the seminary and the other 2 buildings. As you may be aware, there was a meeting on Thursday evening at Bastyr where a number of people commented. I counted 85 people who made comments at that particular meeting, and many of them expressing support for the proposal. There were just some minor changes to the lease document that was approved by the commission this morning, being responsive to some of the comments that were heard at the hearing, and some comments from our legislative delegation. So I'll just touch on a couple of those. The adopted lease does have some provision for reviewing within, I think it's the first 18 or 20 months of operation of the lodge, how visitor parking is priced. That would be people who are visiting the lodge but not staying overnight there. Also, there had been some discussion about the amount of space that would be provided or set aside for state use or a state-approved nonprofit use in the project, and that went from approximately 1,000 square feet to 1,250 to 2,000 square feet to be determined by negotiation. So that was, some of the minor changes that were in the documents that were approved this morning. And along with the lease approval, the exchange agreement for the McDonald property was also approved by the commission. So I think we all recognize what a long journey this has been for state parks. I started attending their meetings when they were talking about the seminary in, I think, March of 2014, and so I think hats off to state parks and to all the people who have followed this project. And the lease itself has been signed, and it will be held in escrow, I believe, until the McDonald property transaction closes. So that is my part of the staff report.
I would like to have one-on-ones this week. So if you have that regular spot, if you could come meet with me at that time. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, comments, initiatives. Councilmember Smith.
Well, first, I'd like to say it was a nice retreat, and if I've got to be locked in a 500-square-foot room with 7 people, I think you're a splendid group. So, yeah. So, but also the other thing I'd like to mention is that as now the chair of the NPRSA, I am making a special emphasis on making sure that we have a quorum to take care of business at our meetings, because it's been a struggle since I've been involved with as our rep in that organization. And so I would like to ask, well, let me preface that by saying I have already asked the other participating cities to make sure they have an alternate that can fill in if the council member reps cannot attend. And so, because I do not want to be a hypocrite, I would like to ask that if our city could also have an alternate, and I would hope that maybe somebody would volunteer to do so. And just so you know, the board meets approximately 4 times a year, and I say approximately because if anything, it's probably 3 times. It's more likely 3 than 4, and most of the meetings are pretty simple. It's a matter of getting our bond payments taken care of, dealing with a few vouchers that need payment, and dealing with more housekeeping issues. Now, it doesn't mean there won't be other issues, but as the chair, I can assure you, if there were big issues coming forward, that would be a meeting I would not want to miss anyway. So that's the long way around getting to the point of hopefully somebody can volunteer for this.
Brent, is there any particular time or day of the week that it meets?
When I know we will not be meeting is on Monday and Tuesday of any week, because we have our meetings Monday, and Bothell, which has 2 city council members, they meet Tuesday. And so I've pretty much eliminated those 2. So most likely the meetings will be on either a Wednesday or a Thursday, and typically around somewhere 6 to 7 o'clock meeting time frame. And it can be as short as 15 minutes, and usually it's not much longer than an hour if there's even a fair amount of things to deal with. Yes, Alan?
I've served on a number of different commissions and committees and so on as the actual voting member and as an alternate. And when I've been an alternate, I've been encouraged, at least when we represent Sound Cities, to attend those meetings as an alternate so that the alternate is up to speed on what the organization is doing, should they have to fill in as a voting member. Would you want this alternate to be attending?
I don't think it's necessary at all, and for 2 reasons. One, because at least 50% of the meetings are more housekeeping, almost, I mean, they're really pretty slam dunk meetings. And so that would be the first thing. The other thing is, if it was anything of importance, I'm more than happy to bring you up to speed on that issue before the meeting, just so, because I will be working with Peggy Whalen, who is working with, we contract for the NPRSA, and her and I will be coordinating the agenda and the items to be discussed. So it'll be pretty straightforward and nothing that I couldn't bring somebody up to speed on.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Stacy. I will accept you.
Thought you might.
Council.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that it?
Yeah, if that's fine with my peers here, then Stacy will be the one. Great. So what I'm going to do is...
No objection from the rest of the council?
What I will do is I will have your contact information provided to Peggy at the NPRSA, and I'm going to have you, when we have an agenda go out, I'm going to have you included on that, just so if you want to take the time to read it, you can at least see what's going on and what's happening.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Clerk, do we need to have a formal motion or that, or just us agreeing is enough? Also, you might want to look into, and this is to the clerk, bringing back something to us the next meeting to reaffirm the appointments that we already have. I'm thinking mainly Seashore, ETP, and there's a number of other things that we have appointing authority to. Sound Cities also appoints, and there's other agencies that appoint that we don't have any authority on. I'm referring strictly to the stuff that we have authority on appointing. Wonderful, thank you. Councilmember Sperry.
Well, just thank you to my colleagues for investing the time and for the staff for the retreat, and that was really a good discussion. And just as one of the things we talked a lot about was the local traffic and Uber and data and all that. And in the Times yesterday, there's actually an article about Uber providing traffic data to city planners, and they're going to be doing it via a website that'll be available to the public in mid-February. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Councilmember Curtis?
I also just wanted to comment on the retreat. As mentioned to Councilmember Herbig earlier, that it's such a great group to work with that I can throw out an idea that's not the greatest idea, but I'm just kind of checking to see if there's any interest. And I don't feel bad if it gets shot down. We just say, cool, bad idea, move on to the next topic. There's not all groups you can do that. So just that give and take, and everybody listens, and we knock things around a little bit. We kind of come to a consensus instead of this big battle, and we just move on. So I appreciate the council and the staff that helps us to be prepared for those retreats.
Here. Councilmember Curtis, Herbig.
Not a whole lot to add. The retreat was productive. I enjoyed it. I think we got good product out of it. I enjoyed my time with you guys. And if I seem a little bit fuzzier on Mondays, it's because session just started, and I have 104 days left after today. So
maybe.
I only have 104 days left in Olympia. How's that?
Okay. Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing really to add, although I am thankful for the extra heaters at the retreat this year.
Yes,
That.
indeed. That's sad when you have to bring your own heaters. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. We have an ETP meeting this Friday, at which time we'll be electing officers for the next year. Although I sent you after. I'd echo what everybody said about the retreat. This is my 11th retreat that I've been to with this council, and all councils have not been as productive, friendly, respectful, and as enjoyable to spend a weekend with over the years. For the last several years, hey, it's been a joy working with all you. We don't agree on everything, but that's okay. We respect each other. I consider you all friends, and hopefully you consider me a friend as well. And we seem to get along really well in these retreats, and not just the retreat, but all the time. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to say, hey, it's been a joy working with all of you, and especially over this last weekend. When I got home on Saturday night, in the email was the newsletter or the blog from National League of Cities, and one of the things that was in there was a two-page bit on smart city development, and in there was a link to the whole document. So if you're interested in looking at it further, it's about a 25-page document or so, but it goes through examples of smart cities with Chicago and Philadelphia and even New Delhi, India, I think is one of them. But the rest of them are in the United States, Charlotte, where they've things that they have been doing from an innovative technology standpoint to enhance the operation of their city. So it's worth reading. What we can apply to the city of Kenmore from this, I'm not too sure, but at least I think we need to be thinking along those lines. So thank you.
Couple of things. We received a request to write a letter in support of PTA and PTSA's efforts in outlining our programs on safe routes to school and zero tolerance programs. I mean, they're looking to deliver a bunch of letters to the governor in support of safe routes to schools and safe routes for pedestrians and bicyclists. So since we're so involved and have been for so many years in safe routes to school, and because of the zero tolerance program that we implemented a few years ago, I think it's important that we support this effort and let the governor know what we're doing and be supportive of our PTA. So if there's no objections, Councilmember, yes.
You mean Target Zero?
Yes, I mean Target Zero.
Yes.
You got enough information there, City Manager?
Yep.
Wonderful. So, also, today was the first day of session, as has been said, and I was down there and I was testifying. So I went in front of the Environmental Committee and in support of 1028, Jerry Paulette's bill. Representative Paulette, he has a bill that is trying to put some regulatory teeth into the city's capabilities with that asphalt and cement plant. So basically, I told them about the location of the city and how the proximity to the Burt Gilman Trail and how we're a waterfront community that enjoys the outdoors, and how we are trying to grow our city responsibly, and the investments we made in the town center and the other things that we're doing, and went on to talk about our efforts to try to make this a more habitable place to live. So anyway, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, first, thank you for doing that. And secondly, was there anybody else that testified either?
Yes, there was.
Could you tell me who those individuals?
Mrs. Moody.
Okay. Was she the only other one that testified?
She was, along with the prime sponsor, Representative Paulette, was there. And then we also had, in support, the head of the Clean Air Agency. And we also had the asphalt industry. We had Cal Portland. We had a bunch of, we had some other people that were against. But AWC has signed in support. So we did have them at least signing in, supporting the concept. So we'll see where it goes. I have a feeling that's going to be the first of many trips down to Olympia this year to testify on matters that are important to us. But if there's no further business to come before us, we are adjourned.